All right, modifiers. Last week, we dove in and began the process of demystifying light modifiers. This week, we're going to pick up where we left off with a quick review, and we're going to keep going. We're going to talk about grids, we're going to talk about feathering, and hopefully get things straight. Stay tuned. Wow, okay, so I'm still here, and this video is not going to play tonight. So that being said, hey, thanks for tuning in, gang. It is Wednesday night. I appreciate all of you being here. A lot of you have already checked in. Let me know you're here and where you're from. If you haven't done that yet, please do. It's always fun to see where people are tuning in from. We have photographers in over 100 countries tuning in to watch The Last Frame live on a weekly basis. And if you're watching it on replay, no sweat. Use the comments down below. Let me know you're watching and where you're watching it from. A couple things really quick. Please do let your friends know about The Last Frame and the kind of stuff that we're doing and we're talking about. You can hit that share button underneath the video, or you can share out the link that I just put in the chat window for you. It's lastframe.live. Don't keep it all to yourself. Let people know. And just in case you haven't been checking it out, if you're not checking out the Talk Chat Photography podcast, you're missing out, gang. Last couple weeks especially, we've had some amazing interviews, and I've got another really great one coming up this week. But last week was all about elopement photography. And I know for a lot of you, you're going to be like, well, I have no interest in doing elopement photography. Neither do I. But I'll tell you what, you will learn some really, really awesome business and marketing tips, as well as a lot about the discipline of running a business if you listen to that episode. And this week's episode, I've got a amazing photographer and a great educator, Mr. Mark Silber. We are going to do a kind of very different type of conversation about up-and-coming photographers, some of the challenges they're facing, and kind of how to help them. So make sure you check that out. All right, so we are back into week 2 of modifiers. I got a lot of feedback last week. Most of it good, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Comments are always appreciated. Thumbs up, of course, are appreciated as well. And, you know, if you just don't like me, go ahead and hit that thumbs down because that helps me out too. It's all good. Really, it is. But here's the thing. We covered a lot of ground last week. And one of the big challenges with modifiers, there's no real right or wrong. There's no one size fits all, which would certainly make things a whole lot easier, right? If it was just always do this or always do that. There's so many options. There's so many possibilities. The only right or wrong in this entire equation, 2 things. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. Let's go 3 things. 1, the physics. The inverse square law, you can't debate that. That's the science part. Done. So the sooner you learn how to use it, and the sooner you take advantage of it as a tool for you to be able to be more creative and to have more control, the better for you. And then number 2, the other 2 rules. First one, do you like it? That's it. Are you happy with it? And then number 3, does your subject like it? Beyond that, it doesn't matter what a bunch of trolls on the internet have to say about it. It simply doesn't. So don't listen to them. And better yet, don't try to do what everybody else is doing. So I want to dive in and start with a little bit of a review from last week, okay? By all means, type in questions as we go. My game plan tonight, you know I always run long, but my game plan tonight is to try and get all the information that I want to share with you done within about the first 40 minutes so that I have another 20 minutes to answer some questions. I know last week there were a few people that had some kind of specific requests and questions along the way. So type, and I will do my best to get to all of them, all right? So first things first, I just want to compare the different modifiers and the different, lights that we looked at last week and the elements that you should be paying attention to for you to be able to decide what kind of modifiers you like and how you like to use them. So just as a quick reminder, let me go back to the setup here. You'll remember that the studio setup that I put together in the software here is basically a 10-foot diameter circle. So it is 5 feet from the model's face to the outside of the circle in any direction. So what I'm showing you here, this basic setup to start, is a lighting setup that you could do in a 10-foot by 10-foot square space, meaning you don't need a lot of room. The background is 5 feet behind my subject. That just happens to be a neutral gray background because I like neutral gray backgrounds, in part because when we start adding additional lights, I can turn that neutral gray background into any color I want. But for now, we're going to leave it gray just because we're really interested in seeing what the light's going to do to the subject. Our light source is on the opposite side of that circle, 5 feet from the subject, and there's the camera. My camera placement, just for your reference, it's based on the fact that I'm a micro four thirds shooter and I'm using a 45mm lens, which is my go-to lens for portrait work. For those of you that are full frame shooters, that's a 90mm equivalent. So you may find yourself physically with your camera a little bit further away from your subject. That's okay. Don't be taking these diagrams so literally that you're thinking you have got to be in this exact spot, right? Also, please remember, from a lighting standpoint, even though the light does not look it, it looks like an old school monolight that you see there, okay? I am basing all of these lighting arrangements on a 200 watt second flash. So for the sake of conversation, we're going to call it a Godox AD200. Why did I pick that? Well, number one, because I use those. If you've ever seen me present, that's what you saw me present with. Number two, they are shaped like speed lights, but they have the option to use a bare bulb head, which I use more often than not. And they're actually just a little bit more powerful than a speed light. A nice strong speed light is going to max out at about 180, 190 watt seconds if you're lucky. Cheaper speed lights are going to be even less than that. So the AD200 is a little bit more powerful than a speed light, but it works like a studio strobe. And then of course from there, you can go up the ladder and you'll find studio strobes at 300 watt seconds, 400 watt seconds, 600 watt seconds, and you know, you can get all the way 12, 1600 watt seconds and more actually, depending on what your needs are. But you're also getting into some big bucks there. In the Godox line, their basic series goes up to 600 watt seconds, okay? So that's the gear that we're working with. That's the basic setup. For the very first shot, what I wanted to do is start out with no modifier. So this is direct flash, not on camera flash. Again, if you look up above me, kind of whoops that side, up there in the corner, it's small. I'm sorry, I have no way to enlarge that piece on the software here. So I will try to remember to check in on these from time to time. But you could see I've got that light placed just above my subject's head. It is slightly off axis, okay? And let's go back to my image here. The things that you should be looking at in this is, number one, the fact that I'm doing direct light with just a 7-inch reflector, and I don't have any hard shadows. I have some deep shadows, but I don't have harsh lines except for right here along the edge of the nose. The fall off is actually somewhat subtle. I could make it even less if I moved the light closer to the camera. I have a very, very small, very natural looking key light in the eye in the upper right hand side, somewhere between 1 and 2 o'clock. That's because I have the light above the subject's head and slightly to camera right. The downside of using a lighting arrangement like this, because this light looks perfectly fine, and I'm sorry, no, there we go. This light looks perfectly fine, but if my subject turns the face back to the camera, I'm gonna have a much heavier shadow on the nose. Or God forbid, if I have her turn even further to camera left, then a good part of her face is going to be in shadow. And more, this program is called Set a Light 3D. Look in the video description and you'll find a link to it. And plus, you'll find a 15% discount code that you can use. It is not an affiliate link. I am not sponsored by Elixir Software, which is the company that makes it. I am not being paid to make these. I am one of the first people on YouTube that introduced this software. You can go back and check in the archives. I've been using it for a long time, but I make no money. That is just a gift that they have given me as a thank you to give along to you folks, okay? So that being said, we have got very functional portrait lighting, one light, direct flash, no modifiers. Now I'm going to move on to my favorite lighting modifier, and that is the shoot-through umbrella, similar to the lights or the modifiers that you see back behind me back here. Those are the exact size that I use. I showed you last week as a point of reference. So you see how big it is in relationship to me. It's about a 32-inch white shoot-through umbrella. We get nice soft light fall off. There are no harsh or heavy shadows anywhere. You will notice, I'm going to flip back to direct flash. I want you to look at the subject's eyes. Look at the catch lights. Pinpoints, bigger, rounder catch lights. Okay? Is one better than the other? It's entirely up to you. There is no set rules, period. My guidelines, if you will, for my personal shooting, because I've done all kinds of catch lights. If you follow me long enough, you know that I used to work with some fluorescent strip lights, and I would have vertical catch lights in the eye. And I love a lot of those shots still today with those vertical catch lights. For me, a catch light works if it works, meaning as long as it kind of fits the shot, fits the mood, fits the intent, as long as it doesn't get in the way and steal my attention, make me look at it, then it's great, okay? So the umbrella, extremely versatile. Now, I want you to notice something though, okay? When I'm on direct flash, so by the way, all of these shots that I'm showing you, f8, right? So I have not changed the aperture. I am changing the power of the 200 watt second flash so that I'm balancing out whatever impact the modifier has. So direct flash, I've got my power all the way down to 4.7 to shoot at f8. When I go to the umbrella, which is going to diffuse the light and spread the light more because of its shape, I've got my power boosted all the way up to 5.8. Still only a little bit over 50%, right? So 200 watt seconds, whoops, thank you guys. My apologies. Anytime I do that, type faster, Lynn. Thank you. Okay. So here, one more time. We'll go back here. Shooting at f8, 4.7 is my power setting, right? When I switch over to the shoot through umbrella, I'm going to go to 5.8 power setting. So I'm still only just over 50% power. But the reason why I had to pull the power up to get essentially the same finished exposure is because the umbrella is allowing light to spread. It's actually forcing the light to spread more and dissipate more. That's not a bad thing. That's just something that you need to understand. When you modify with something in front of your light, not a reflector, but something in front of it, it is going to cut down on the power of light that you have. So you have to compensate by comparison. So a lot of people like to work with Octa Boxes or round softboxes. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch to a 24-inch Octa Box. So we're going to go back through those first three really quick. Direct flash, umbrella, 24-inch Octa Box. Now you'll notice the 24-inch Octa Box, the shadows here are slightly more distinct than they are with the umbrella. That's because 24 inches is fairly small. So it is essentially focusing the light smaller before the light begins to spread. The light is still at the 5-foot mark from the subject. It's on the outside of the circle right there. It's just above my subject's head. No major changes there, okay? And you see you have a small catch light in the upper portion of the eye. It certainly would not hurt if this was the softbox that I was going to use for me to lower the light slightly to get just a little bit more of a catch light. But for the sake of comparing one modifier to the next, I have not changed the height of the modifier. From there, we go a little bit bigger to a 36-inch. And you'll notice if you watch the jawline, especially through here, you watch a little bit of the base of the neck and the top of the chest, things soften up a little bit because we've got a slightly bigger modifier. So we're starting at a larger light source, which also creates the spread faster in relationship to my subject. Light is at the same height. Light is at the same distance. As I've gone through these now, remember, I started at at 4.7 power setting. With the umbrella, went up to 5.8. With the 24-inch Octa Box, had to go up to 6.7 because this Octa Box has both an inner baffle and a diffuser. Now, let's talk about that for a second. The idea of should you use them, shouldn't you use them? I'm going to show you proof of what you should and shouldn't do in a few minutes. But for now, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what they are, what they do, etc. When you're working with a softbox or an Octa Box or any of these types of modifiers, on the front, you have the primary diffuser. So that's the one that's going to basically cover the entire light source, like so. Now you can see this particular one. This is a collapsible beauty dish. This is a Photix Raja 65. This is my go-to light modifier. If I'm not using an umbrella, 90% of the time, this is what I'm going to be using. Doesn't matter if I'm shooting with strobes or if I'm shooting with my Stella Pro LED lights, this is going to be my modifier. Silver lined on the inside, but I also have an inner baffle. What is the purpose of the inner baffle? It's actually really simple. This modifier is only about 20 inches deep. It's very shallow. If I didn't have this baffle in, I'm going to wind up essentially with a hot spot in the middle of my modifier. So here I am thinking, well, I've got a 32-inch diameter modifier, but in reality, it's actually only going to be about a 26 or 27-inch modifier because that's all the further the light is going to spread before it hits this diffuser. So by using the interior baffle, it is designed to make sure the light distributes more evenly so that I have even light across the entire front diffuser. So that's the point behind baffles. I know some of you are already like, well, is there a reason or a time where you want to take the baffles out, or for that matter, even take the front diffusers out? Sure, absolutely. We're going to get to that in a little bit, just not quite yet, okay? So again, we're back to the 24-inch Octa Box. If we step up a little bit to the size that I like, the 36-inch, actually mine's a 32, so it's slightly smaller, but it's the in-between. It's the closest I could get with the software, right? Things a little bit softer yet. You'll notice the catch light getting a little bit bigger now. And then if we go and we move up to the 48-inch Octa Box, now we have little softer yet and an even bigger catch light, taking up easily a third of the eye. So it's starting to get pretty big. So why is the light softer with a 48-inch? Because I haven't moved it. I have turned up the power. I'm all the way up to 7.2 now on the power scale. 36 was at 6.8. Just a reminder, 24 was at 6.7, okay? So the reason why it's softer is because this box is bigger, so the light is wrapping more. It's covering the sides, as opposed to the 24-inch, which is just going to get the front, right? Pretty simple so far. Now, let's switch to a beauty dish. Beauty dish, and I'm still with this particular beauty dish. I am putting it at the 5-foot mark. You'll notice it's still high and above my subject. So you should be getting the hit now. I always, for me, want my light coming down on my subject. Very simple reason for that. It's actually science. Science is that by the time we are 2 years old, it is hardwired in our brains. We expect light to be coming from above. Otherwise, every room you would walk into would be like Studio 54 and the lights would be in the floor, right? That's why we put lights in the ceiling. So that is what our brains expect. That is what we are accustomed to. So generally speaking, I am going to work to create natural type lighting scenarios where the light is above and the catch lights are in the top part of the eye. So the challenge is with a beauty dish, and I'm going to compare this to my umbrella, right? So here is, whoops, let me do it the other way around. There's the umbrella. There's the beauty dish. Umbrella on the left, beauty dish on the right. So you can see that the beauty dish lighting, I've got a smaller catch light than the umbrella, but the lighting is starting to get a little bit harsh again. And gang, it's important that you understand before you're thinking and taking notes like, okay, I got to go buy this light and that light. A big part of what I'm trying to impress on all of you is that you don't need all of these modifiers. I mean, if you like toys and you got a lot of money to throw around, knock yourself out, right? But you don't need them. Hopefully you can understand that there is easily a $100 difference in the two modifiers you're looking at right now. Depending on the brand and the size of the beauty dish that you buy, it could be a lot more than a $100 difference. For the difference in the light between the two, I'm sorry, you can't justify that, at least not from my bank account, because I know that if I use the inverse square law to my advantage, I can take this lighting arrangement with my umbrella. I can move that umbrella a little bit closer to my subject and I can get this same look. with one difference, just one difference. That difference is the catch light will be a little bit bigger because I'm using the umbrella. That's the only difference, right? So also with the beauty dish, actually, I'm going to move on from the beauty dish because we're going to come back to all of these with grids because we're going to modify the modifiers, right? So next along the line, the ones that we looked at last week, we looked at the Parabolic softboxes. So this one is a 36-inch collapsible Parabolic. And you'll notice it doesn't look a whole lot different than it does with the 36-inch Octa Box. Extremely subtle lighting, okay? So again, do me a favor, like I honestly don't care what gear you want to get. No offense, like I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I would hope that you would actually listen. Otherwise, you don't need to be here, right? So let's listen and learn, okay? This is not a gear conversation about lights. This is a conversation about why you shouldn't be buying gear and owning 16 different modifiers and getting the latest, coolest, greatest modifier when it comes out and helping another company raise money on Kickstarter so that they can give. That's what this is about. Let's be clear, all right? So we can take that then and we can go from a 36 parabolic and we can go to an inverse parabolic. So here's the regular parabolic. There's the inverse parabolic. Notice the only real difference between the two is the background. So why is that? So parabolics do tweak the inverse square law slightly. So without getting really crazy into the inverse square law, because I've already done a video on it, which you should have watched. If you haven't watched the inverse square law video, I'll put the link here in the chat. It's already in the description underneath the video, but you should be checking it out. The reason why the parabolics tweak the inverse square law is because of how deep they are. So a parabolic modifier, let me go ahead and hit one of these here, apply that to the stage. They're the ones that are super, super, super deep. And that also means, by the way, they're very front heavy on a light stand. So if you're going to work with parabolics, you better have heavy duty stands, and you're probably still going to need weights on those stands because you've got a lot of weight hanging out the front. Not to mention, make sure that you're mounting them on a light that can actually support that weight. Don't be buying a cheap studio strobe and think that it's going to hold up under the pressure of having a big parabolic reflector on it all the time. But because of the depth, the parabolic umbrellas are able to create a little bit more of a tunnel effect with the light. Now, you will get people debating over yes or no, the light still spreads. I'm in camp spread, meaning it's not going to spread rapidly when the light comes out of the parabolic, but it still spreads. If you're working with a parabolic without a front diffuser, it will spread less. If you have a front diffuser on the parabolic, it's going to spread a little bit more, but not as much as with a softbox or an Octa Box or an umbrella. Anyway, it goes. Let's go back here, okay? There's the 36-inch parabolic. There's the shoot-through umbrella. So shoot-through umbrella is on the right. Excuse me, let me make sure I've got those the right way around here. Let's do that one more time. There's the umbrella. There's the parabolic on the right. So shoot-through umbrella is on the left. My apologies. Parabolic is on the right. Background looks almost the same. The lighting is slightly more harsh. Considerably more cost to purchase the parabolic reflector. Also, from a power standpoint, in this parabolic, I've got the power pushed up to 6.8 so that I can continue to shoot at f8. On my shoot-through umbrella, I'm at 5.8, so I'm actually using less power, right? So after the parabolics, we went with a silver umbrella. So let's compare umbrella to umbrella. So there's the shoot-through umbrella, and here's a 41-inch silver umbrella. So this silver umbrella is a little bit bigger, but it's silver. What are the big differences that I see? Really, the biggest difference is the background. Because the silver umbrella is a little bit brighter, I'm using less power and I'm getting a more rapid light fall off. The shoot-through umbrella, remember my power setting was 5.8 to be able to shoot at f8. In the 41-inch silver umbrella, my power setting is all the way down below 50% at 4.6. And again, this is a traditional umbrella where the light is reflecting into the umbrella, not through it, okay? But again, I want you to see not a huge difference in the light on her face. The silver umbrella is potentially just a little bit more harsh, but we are splitting hairs at this point over, which one's softer, okay? So that was the modifier range that we looked at last week. That was the comparison. Two other things that we talked about, and I kind of rushed through them at the end. So let's review really quick, and then we're going to get into grids, right? And we'll get into the breakdown of when should you use the modifiers in different variations. So one of the things that we see happening a lot on YouTube videos, we see it a lot. If you go to like ISO 1200 magazines, Instagram thread, and you look at all the behind the scenes pictures of everybody out there with their FJ 400s and their Godox 600s overpowering the sun and doing the same stuff day after day after day after day. And I get it. I'm being a jerk when I say that. I don't mean to be a jerk. I'm being a jerk because, hey, you know what? If they enjoy it, it's not up to me to say. And I'm wrong for that. So I'll own that and I'll apologize. But doggone it, if only these people would take the talent and the effort they're putting in and actually try some new things and some different things. Just imagine the cool images that we would have to look at. Because these people, they're not hacks. They're not bad. But they're kind of lazy. Just saying, right? So anyway, one of the things that we see happening in these videos so often, and they're getting nice pictures frequently. So are they wrong for doing what I'm about to show you? They're not wrong, but they're also not working efficiently. I guarantee you they're doing more post-production, and they're also making their subjects claustrophobic and uncomfortable because they are dumping the lights right on top of their subject, okay? So what I want to show you here is an example where, let's see, I want to make sure I get the right scenario here. My apologies. Okay, so we're going to start with this one. And here you see this all over the web. You see it all over YouTube. Photographers setting up big modifiers right on top of their subjects, angled down like that. Now, what I want you to notice right out of the box is that the top of the modifier is much closer to the subject's head than it is to the shoulders. And that's risky, especially if you don't have a makeup artist. Because if you have shiny skin, you are going to have tons of glare and highlight. I also want you to notice this right now that I'm using on here is, let's see, what size do I have this? My apologies. This is a 48-inch Octa Box that I've got on there. See how big the Octa Box is compared to the subject's head? Which is overkill for this shot, right? So you can see what we get above me here. Take a look at that. We're going to come back and we're going to compare them side by side in a minute. The other thing that photographers will do at that point is, let me load a different one here. Whoops, sorry. That's the one. Nope, that's not the one. My apologies. There it is. Okay, that one's off to the side a little bit more. Now I'm going to bring it around front. But what I want you to notice in the shot that's above, I want you to notice that the arm is lit up. Let's see here. Am I getting the right one? This is the one that I wanted. Sorry. I want you to see how the arm is lit up and the arm is bright because of how close it is. And I want you to see how the forehead is brighter than the chin, right? So ideally, what you want to do is you want to back the light up like it is here. That's just too close because you get that fall. Look at the forehead, look at the chin. Here, there's still a difference, but it's more even, it's more balanced. So one of the things that I want all of you to notice, if you're out there watching other YouTubers doing lighting, and if you're like thinking, oh my God, like, yeah, I'm learning tons of lighting because I'm watching this guy's lighting and I'm watching this guy's lighting. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I am saying pay attention to the nuanced differences. Gang, lighting is about nuance. Because I hate to tell you, and I'm not trying to be cocky or a jerk, I'm being honest. Lighting is simple. Please get that in your heads and stop being afraid of it. The reason why so many of you struggle with lighting, and feel free, like if I completely missed the boat, you type away and tell me I'm an idiot. But let me explain, because I'm going to explain what I know a lot of you have done. A lot of you, and we're not even going to bring YouTube into the equation here. A lot of you, what you've done is when you decided you were going to do portrait lighting and you wanted to do stuff like this, you didn't just buy a light. You went out and bought a light and a modifier. In fact, you probably bought a second and a third light and a couple of modifiers and maybe some reflectors and maybe some gels and then backgrounds. And of course you needed stands. You got all this stuff. And then you were overwhelmed. And then your lighting sucks because you never actually took the time to learn how to manage one light. One of the things that's great about working with natural light outdoors, and by no means am I saying natural light is easy. Natural light is harder because natural light requires you to really learn to see light, to pay attention to the details. But the great thing about working with natural light outdoors, there's only one light source. I'm talking middle of the day, okay? Anytime during the day, there's the sun. It's one light source. And then there are other reflectors. White concrete is an awesome reflector. Black concrete actually works as a reflector if the macadam is newer, not older. Mirrored walls, all kinds of stuff work as reflectors, but there's still only one primary light source. So the easiest, most efficient way to learn lighting in a studio, and by the way, when I say in a studio, you could be shooting in your living room, in your kitchen. I don't care where you're shooting, but if you're going to work with studio lighting, start with one light. Start with one light and master it. Because once again, I have shown you, hands down, one light, even without a modifier, we can make a very nice portrait. I don't even have a shadow in the background. One light, flattering light, no shadow. Shocker, right? That's because I learned how to work with light and I understand what the lights will do at different placements. If you introduce 2, 3 lights all at once, you're making it 50 times harder, probably 1,000 times harder to actually be able to see the nuanced differences from one light to the next and what's really happening. And what happens, and we see it in video after video after video, and behind the scenes after behind the scenes after behind the scenes on, Instagram profiles like ISO 1200. It's photographers actually overlighting their shots. I don't mean overexposing, I mean overlighting, meaning it looks really cool because they've got 3 of their buddies with big, parabolic reflectors on poles, and they've got somebody else holding a reflector, and they've got this big team of people, and they're creating light that you could have done with one modifier. In fact, for that matter, oftentimes you could have done it with just a reflector. So they're overlighting it to get the shot. And there's really no benefit. Now, it doesn't make their picture bad, but since they're showing off the behind the scenes, if you really understand the light, you kind of got to scratch your head and say, why did you need all that light? What did it do for you? Because it didn't do anything. That's my point. Learn with one, learn it inside out and backwards, master it, then work on modifying it. Master that. Then when you add the second light, everything that you do with that second light screams in your head like, oh, that's from the second light. Oh, that's what this is. It's much easier to see it. It's much easier to learn the nuances between the lights. The key to lighting is nuance. That's entirely the key. And that requires seeing the details, right? So one of the other sets of examples that I gave you last week, and I'm dealing primarily with portraits for this set of examples, but I want to go ahead and I know a lot of you like to shoot models full length. So keeping it simple with the goal being that maybe I'm going to convince you to be a little bit patient and not run out and buy 6 more modifiers that you don't need right away. I'm trying to save you money. Let me show you what you need to do and how you can do it with the modifiers you may already have. So I started out the same lighting setup that I was working with as far as the 10-foot diameter circle. Since it's a full-length picture, obviously I rolled the seamless paper down, but I am using the 42-inch umbrella, and I've got it set above my subject's. The light itself is above my subject's eyes. I always want the light to come from above, right? That's the key. So the challenge with this arrangement is when we look at this shot, it's not that it's bad, but it really depends on what you want the picture for. If you want something that's a little bit dramatic, this is awesome because notice how the light falls off. As we go from top to bottom, we have a pretty dramatic light fall off. We're simply not lighting her feet. And in part, that's because this umbrella is only 5 feet away. It's pretty doggone close for a full-length picture, right? But now if I take the umbrella and I tilt it down, so it's still at the same height, but I'm going to tilt it down. So notice there's the tilt on the umbrella now. Here's the previous shot. It was set just like it was for a portrait. So I'm going to tilt it down, and now I get more even lighting. So again, the first one where it was set for portrait, second one where I tilted it down. My lighting is much more even. But I want to be clear, depending on what you're using this image for, you're still going to need to do a little bit of post-production, but you can get away with this, right? So now I'm breaking one of my own rules for the sake of budget. If you don't have a lot of money and you're not looking to spend a lot of money, what I'm showing you right now works really, really well. But you have to do a little post-production. I want you to notice the shadows that are here on the tops of the lines that come down under her eyes. That's because my modifier, more of it is now below her face. So I've also got light coming from above and from below. So it's creating some top shadowing. Not a lot, but I promise you those little lines that you're seeing there on a subject's face, they're not going to light. So you're going to need to soften them. A little bit of dodging and burning, problem solved, super easy. In a perfect world, yes, they're not going to be there when I'm shooting. But if you're on a budget, this light's just fine, but don't ignore that little lighting situation, right? Now, if we want to make it even more even, how's that? I want you to still notice there is still some light fall off. Nowhere near as much as we had in the first place, but still some. If I back my light up, look how much more even it becomes. So now what I've done is I've backed the light all the way up to 10 feet instead of 5 feet, right? So here I was in the previous shot. Here I've backed it up. And now what I have is, there's the 5-foot version. Or excuse me, that's the 5-foot version. This is the 10-foot version. Okay? So the light is much more even top to bottom, but I still have that same little bit of top shadow. It's a super, super simple, quick, easy retouch if I'm on a budget. Because the other challenge is, gang, and I'll use my studio as an example. So if you've never seen my studio, there's a video of it on my YouTube channel. The ceilings are less than 8 feet. Yeah, it's in my basement. All those videos that you've seen me done, they're in my basement. It's an 8-foot ceiling. So it's not like I can get the light way up above her in that studio. I can't. So I'm always going to do that little tiny retouch. No big deal. If it's a full-length picture, right? So it will depend, of course, on the height of the model, how tall she is, and am I able to get the light way above her, okay? So now, this has been with an umbrella so far. So let's do it now with the light at the same distance. I'm not going to move the light, but I'm going to switch from the umbrella to, whoops, that was not what I wanted to do. Sorry, I'm going to switch the umbrella, which is there, to a medium softbox at 10 feet. So this is a vertical medium softbox, okay? About 36 inches tall. And that's what we're going to get. Okay? And I left out the shoot-through umbrella, my favorite light. If I go back to the shoot-through umbrella, I actually get pretty decent lighting. There is fall-off, but it's not as dramatic. Here's the original fall-off with the regular umbrella. Look how fast the light falls off. Look at how bright she is here, and then it gets really dark. If I work with the shoot-through umbrella, I do get fall-off, but it's much more subtle. Depending on what you want, depending on what you like, you could totally work with that, okay? And again, that's at 5 feet right now. So this is the close version. I'll apply that to the stage. So that's the shoot-through umbrella at the same distance if I was doing portraits, right? If I take the shoot-through umbrella and I move it back to 10 feet, now I have perfectly even light. So here is the regular umbrella, silver finish. Here is the shoot-through umbrella, both at 10 feet. In this case, you'll notice the shoot-through umbrella wins. The shadow in the background is softer than it is with the silver. Something to think about, okay? There's no right or wrong. And it would be very easy to make these identical with just a tiny little bit of post-production. And I do want you to notice, since I kept talking about the lines on her face and the top shadows, look at the top shadows with the silver umbrella. Look at the top shadows with the white shoot-through umbrella. They are much, much softer, greatly reduced. So again, for me so far, 2 modifiers win the day. 1, the shoot-through umbrellas, like you see here. They're the way to go. 2, 32 to 36 inch round collapsible softbox. Totally the way to go. And this Photox, by the way, it's collapsible. You reach in, pop a button, folds up. Awesome, okay? It's a Bowens mount, super, super easy to work with, all right? So let's come back here. One other option, if you have space, is to shoot your full-length shot at a 60-inch or a 5-foot umbrella, okay? So here was the shoot-through umbrella, the small shoot-through umbrella. Here is the big 5-foot umbrella, just so you can see what I've got set up here. Or excuse me, not umbrella, Octa Box, okay? This obviously requires a lot more space. This is big, right? 60 inches is 5 feet in diameter. So they're huge to work with, all right? But also works very nicely, very even light, okay? So takeaways, work with what you have. Only buy a new modifier if you have a legitimate need, if it is legitimately going to make a difference in your work. But please understand, you've just seen me go through all the primary modifiers that are available in the market, and the differences are negligible at the same placements and the same setups. So if you're shooting portraits, it honestly doesn't matter which one of them you have. Because for every one of the little subtleties that I showed you, I can neutralize that with a slight movement or a slight change so that it looks just like any of the other ones. That's all the inverse square law stuff, right? A little bit of practice and you'll figure that out. It's super, super simple. So I told you that we talk about the idea of, you know, do you use grids? Do you use the baffles? Do you use the modifiers? What do you do? So let's actually start with the grids. I want to come back up here and we're going to go back to a portrait setup. So there's my standard Octa Box that I like to use. No grid, right? So again, just as a reminder for the setup, there's the setup, right? I usually put the bottom of the box right about eye level, maybe sometimes mouth level, but you know, it's right in this spot here. The majority of the light is above my subject because I want the light to fall naturally as if it, you know, were natural light, okay? And I've got the middle baffle and the front diffuser on the Octa Box. So that's what we're seeing here. Now, without moving the light, but I will have to adjust the power. So right now I'm at 6.8 on the power scale out of 10 with that modifier in. If I use a grid, okay, and a lot of you know that whenever people are going on about grids, I start rolling my eyes because again, so many of you are using grids for the wrong reasons, and you're actually just making your jobs so much harder, so much harder. So here's that same Octa Box with a grid. Did you see it change? Without the grid, with the grid. Without the grid, with the grid. Without the grid, with the grid. Let me do them side by side. Without the grid, with the grid. Wow, what a change. Just saying. how many YouTube videos are there about how amazing grids are? Grids have a purpose, gang. They really, really do, okay? But understand, you know what the biggest difference between these two pictures is? Notice the background's a little bit darker with a grid. A little bit, fractionally. Keep in mind that without the grid, if I needed the background a little bit darker, if I had an extra foot of space, I could move that gray background back 1 foot and it'd be just as dark, right? Just saying. So, but the big difference is without the grid, I'm at 6.8 power, okay? With the grid, I had to go all the way up to 7.1 power. So if I'm shooting a battery-operated strobe, be it a speed light, be it a Godox, whatever it is, I'm shooting on batteries, I'm using more battery power with the grid. And what am I getting for the light? Notice the light's actually a little bit harsher. It's extremely, extremely subtle difference. Literally, you know, look at the jawline between two. Extremely subtle. And personally, I don't find this extra harshness flattering, but that's my taste. If you like that, that's okay. It's totally okay for you to like this lighting. Let's be clear. But for me, no. So I'm using more power, draining my batteries more, taxing my strobes more. For what? It's honestly not worth it. Without the grid, I can take the Octa Box and move it slightly closer and have the same result, right? So that's test one with a grid. Let's do the beauty dish, okay? So here's the beauty dish setup with no grid, right? And by the way, no diffuser either. This is at least actually, now that I said that, I apologize. Let me see. No, I have no diffuser on the beauty dish. For those of you that maybe are new to lighting, I should show you this. The way a beauty dish works, so this is a little one. I hardly ever use this one, right? But it's a small one. So light goes in the back, but you'll notice you can't see through it. That's because you see where my hand is underneath there? There is a deflector plate that goes around. So basically the light comes in through the back of the beauty dish, hits that deflector plate, is reflected into the white dish, and then comes out, right? Now, if you've never heard me talk about these before, let me get this clear. Here's the disclaimer. It's called a beauty dish. It makes really ugly, harsh light. Honest, it does. I swear. Unless you really know what you're doing with it. Period. Okay? And myself, I would never actually use one this small. This was, I picked this up like dirt cheap somewhere years ago. It's like way too small. My standard beauty dish for my taste is a 21-inch beauty dish, right? You can put grids on these. They snap into the edge here. I don't have a grid for this one. And then you can put what they call a sock over it, which is basically just a front diffuser that goes over the front, okay? So the ones that you're seeing me work with here, I do not have the front diffuser on it. I don't think the software actually allows me to do that, but it is a beauty dish setup. So here is the standard beauty dish. This is what I showed you before as a beauty dish example. If I add a grid to it, I lose the background completely. Not a big change in my subject, but I lose the background completely. So there's my subject. Subject with no grid, subject with grid. So we'll do them side by side. No grid, with grid, okay? And you can see, again, subtle difference. If you look at that jawline, there is a subtle difference in the sharpness of the shadow. It's a little bit more dramatic with the grid in, but it does give me the darker background. And once again, I have not, let's go to here. I've not changed the background for any of these so far. The background is still at 5 feet, right? So you can see the grid over, oh, sorry, gang. My apologies. I did it again. So bad. Okay. So let's go back. My apologies. Beauty dish, no grid. Beauty dish with the grid. Okay. So beauty dish, no grid. Beauty dish with the grid. All right. So you can see we lose the background, which there could be value to that for you if you're in a really, really tight space. It does get a little bit more harsh. Look at the jawline on both sides. Again, I'm not a fan of that harshness, but if you like that, cool, right? And please do keep in mind that that harshness that you're seeing in these examples, in real life, it's also going to depend on the shape of your subject's face. Do they have good jawbone definition? And it will depend on the makeup that your makeup artist has done. So understand, when you see those images with the models with the really sharp jaw lines that are chiseled and detailed, don't assume that it's all lighting, and don't assume that the model's face is actually that chiseled. Makeup does a lot of the work when you see those really, really dramatic chiseled jaw lines. Okay? So that also means, though, that you could work with an umbrella, and if you're working with a makeup artist, just have them do a little bit more contouring on the face, and you'll get the exact same end result on the face without having to have a more expensive modifier. So again, it's all about problem solving, and there are many ways to get it done. So on the left, just the beauty dish. On the right, beauty dish with the grid. Power differences, just the beauty dish, I'm at 7.4. Beauty dishes suck up light because the light's coming forward, bouncing back, and then coming out. 7.4 is my power setting. When I put the grid on, I actually pick up a little bit of light because it's concentrating it. So I'm down at 7.3 to get the same exposure. It's not a big difference, but you know, it's subtle. And by the way, you can purchase beauty dishes in white or in silver. I am not a big fan of silver. It's tend to be a little bit too cold. So I prefer all of white. Jur, are grids and barn doors the same in your opinion? Well, it's not an opinion. They're definitely not the same. They do completely different things and they serve different purposes. That's not an opinion. That's a design fact. I don't know if I'll get the barn doors tonight. In fact, I probably won't. Gosh, it's 10 of 7 already. Wow. I won't get to barn doors tonight, but I will talk about barn doors as we go forward. I promise. Okay. So let me keep going here. All right. I want to get some more grid stuff in here. I want to go ahead and I want to give you guys a breakdown of when do you kind of disassemble these modifiers and when do you use the missing parts. So we're going to go back to my favorite, where am I at here? Both diffusers. There it is. My favorite modifier, right? The one that I showed you before. It's the, the 32 to 36 inch round Octa Box. There's the look. Just to show you the placement. Again, I'm back to my 10-foot circle. My light is 5 feet away from my subject. The bottom of the light is at eye level, right? So it's everything like where we started. We're working with a really simple basic lighting setup so that you can see the nuanced differences in these modifiers. Now, if I take everything out of this box, I pull the front diffuser off, I pull the middle baffle off, and of course I don't have a grid on it, I get this light. There it is with the 2 diffusers, there it is without. So let's do it again. With the 2 diffusers on the left, with no diffusers on the right. Almost no difference. You'll notice there is a slight difference in the background color, but what I do want you to start to notice is look at the catch lights in the eyes. With the diffusers, I do have a nice catch light. Without the diffusers, I actually have this kind of wonky spider-looking type catch light in the eye because I don't have that big round white spot that is being reflected. It's looking at the inside of the Octa Box, okay? Now, if I just use the inner diffuser. So here we're going to go, that's the open one. So this is with nothing on it. If I add just the inner diffuser, so that's that baffle that I showed you, this is what I get. Extremely subtle, but now the catch light looks even weirder yet because what's happening now is the catch light is just these reflections around the outside. Right? That's what the catch light is because it's the light sneaking out past the baffle. So while you can do it for a portrait, it kind of looks a little awkward, right? It just does. So let's do another variation. What about adding a grid? What if we take the open softbox, no diffusers, no baffles, and we put a grid on it? So here it is open, here it is with the grid. Just like with a beauty dish, you notice what happens. Since it narrows the light down a little bit, we lose a little bit more of the brightness of the background. That's that inverse square law kicking in. right? That's the benefit there. The lighting on her, just like with the beauty dish and just like with the softbox before that, it gets a little sharper, but it's so subtle. So subtle, right? And then the last option is, what if I take that 36-inch Octa Box and I have the Baffle, the Diffuser, and the grid, and I do all of them together? There's the differences. So here we have the open box. Here we have it with the baffles. Here we have, excuse me, with just the grid. Open box on the left, grid in the middle, diffusers and grid on the right. I want you to notice how subtle the difference is. And then also, just to show you here, here's the box the way that I use it, with the front diffuser and the middle baffle. Here's the box with the grid on it. The only real difference is the background is slightly darker and the light fall off is a little bit more rapid. That's it. So part of the reason why, gang, and please believe me, like I don't gain anything if I try to mislead you. If anything, you know what? If anything, don't believe me and go try it yourself and prove me wrong, because you can't. The reason why you're seeing so many of these photographers online using these big boxes with grids, because they think the grids are cool, and then putting them right on top of the subject. It's the only way that they're getting the light soft enough, because they've got to get it really close. That's it. Now, is there a benefit to doing that? Depending on where you're shooting and what you're shooting, it helps you make the background even darker yet, because you're really squeezing the background properties on the inverse square law. But as far as your subject goes, no, when you're dumping that light right on top of them and using the grid, it's a very focused light. So you're actually going to wind up with one exposure on the top of the head and another exposure on the chin, which means if you're aware of it, you're going to do a lot of post-production to balance it out. Or if you're not aware of it, you're actually going to post sloppy images, right? That's the challenge. So another question that I get frequently is, should I be using a softbox, like a rectangular softbox? Should I be using it vertically or horizontally, right? It really doesn't matter. What I mean by that is this, okay? Here is just a softbox aimed at a wall. Let me go back to the stage so you can see. It's like I'm just literally aiming a softbox at a wall horizontally, right? So there's the light pattern that you get there. Now, if I go vertical, same, right? There it's vertical. So let's go back. So there's the horizontal pattern. There's the vertical pattern. Not much of a difference, right? This one, I went without the diffuser. You'll notice it's just an open box, right? Just to give you those kind of three comparisons. We'll come back. Very, very little difference. The way the inverse square law works, even though it's a rectangular modifier, as the light leaves the modifier, it turns into a cone. As the further it gets from the modifier, it doesn't retain its rectangular shape as it spreads. Only at a very, very short distance will it retain that shape. The further it gets from the light source, the more it starts to round out, and it turns into a cone. So depending on how you're placing your lights, it doesn't matter. If you do the kinds of scenarios that I've been showing you, where I'm going to have that light approximately 5 feet from my subject, it's really not going to make a difference. In fact, here, let me go to the softbox. I thought I had a softbox in here. I may not have a softbox in here. I apologize. I don't have a medium. I thought I did. I apparently don't have a medium softbox that I can show you, but I promise you it's basically the same light on the subject, with the difference being you're going to have a rectangular catch light instead of a round catch light. So is it bad to have a rectangular box? No, it's just understand that, that's what you're going to be dealing with. Okay. And let me just see really quick what I had set up on this last one here. We may need to make this a third week here. I just want to see what I've got going on. Because I'll apologize. I don't remember what these last setups were. Oh, feathering. You know what? I'm going to save feathering. I know I said I get to feathering tonight, but I'm going to save feathering because that's another one of my pet peeves. And I'll tell you why. The way that I learned feathering, and this was, wow, this was probably 40 years ago now, a little over 40 years ago. Feathering was a convenience. It wasn't a technique. If you were shooting, you had to keep going back and forth to your subject to take meter readings because this was old school and we were working with film. So you had to get the exposure right. And you would learn pretty quickly that if you were setting your modifiers like you see me setting them in my diagrams, like 5 feet away, which is perfect for portraiture. And it actually gives you so much more control. If you're setting your modifiers at that distance and you take a meter reading and you're half a stop overexposed on the light, instead of going back and adjusting the power of the light, you would just take the modifier and swing it out to the side a little bit and take another reading and you'd have your half stop. The reason why you would do it that way, which was kind of it was a shortcut, is because it made virtually no difference in the lighting. That's the point. So just like I was showing you with grids, does feathering make a difference in your light? Yeah, a subtle difference. The biggest difference that you'll get with feathering is not on your subject. It is on your background. So feathering can indeed be used as a way to try and keep light off the background. And by the way, that's usually the best use for grids. It just is. And part of the reason why I don't like grids, just full disclosure, like I make no secret about it. Part of the reason why I don't like grids is just they're a pain in the butt. They take longer to attach to the lights. They require you to turn the light up. You need more power. They do not give you light that's as soft. So obviously, if you look at my photography, you know that I prefer soft, flattering light. So everything I'm giving you is within that context, right? Because this is not a one size fits all. But, you know, the work that I do, I tend to go with soft, flattering light. But my images aren't flat. There is always shape and depth to my faces. That's important. So there's always shadow. It's just not harsh, dramatic shadow most of the time, right? So the key to all this, gang, is honestly to practice. I know a lot of you, last week, I got a lot of comments and I really appreciate the comments. People say, you know, wow, that was such an eye opener. Like, I understand it so much more now. And honestly, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm being straight. You actually don't understand it as much as you think you do. Not unless you go and pick up your camera, turn on some lights, and start experimenting and start practicing. I'm so serious. I can't stress that enough. You have to actually experiment with this stuff. Everything that I showed you tonight, I did not learn it in a book. I didn't learn it in a class. And I can tell you honestly, if somebody would have handed me a book that had all that information in it, I wouldn't have been able to finish it. I would have put the book down and walked away. I would have been overwhelmed. And I know a lot of you feel overwhelmed by this stuff. You have to take this stuff and you have to go pick up your camera and you have to try it. You have to experiment with things, right? That's the only way that you are going to get the job done. Also, it's important to note, and I should have said this earlier. I apologize for not throwing this in earlier. Everything that I showed you in both of these last 2 episodes works with speedlights as well as it does with studio strobes, with one caveat. Okay? Don't put a speed light, in other words, with the rectangular Fresnel head, right? Don't put a speed light in a 4-foot Octa Box or a 4-foot Softbox. Just don't, because the speed light is not going to be able to fill the full front surface of that light. Speed lights have lenses on them. So if you do use a speed light, your challenge is to get the light as far away from the front diffuser as possible. Even if you're doing an umbrella, don't stick that speed light right up close to the umbrella. Make sure that the zoom on the speed light head is zoomed as wide as it goes and back that light up as far as you can from the umbrella. You need the time and the distance for the light to be able to spread to fill the whole modifier. So if you can afford studio lights, bare bulb heads are much easier to work with modifiers because they throw light a full 180 degrees all the way. okay? But if you only have the ability to use speed lights, just make sure that you're getting them as far away as possible. So, Robert, you used diffusers with candles, but they caught on fire. Yeah, that's a whole different YouTube video, Robert. So anyway, gang, I think this is a good starting point. I know that a lot of you are hoping I would get further tonight. And you know what? I'm actually not going to apologize for that. And here's why. I think it was really worth reviewing some of this stuff to really start to, to really start to kind of get it to sink in and to start to get you to be aware and understanding of some of these different scenarios. Here's what I'm going to propose. Hopefully you folks will come back next week and I'll tell you what I'll do. So you have some homework. I'm going to give you homework. The homework is next week, I'll talk about the feathering and I'll show some examples. I'm not going to review all of it again, but what I want to do is I want you folks to show up and you can throw me the what happens if we do this. And it's not about stumping Joe, because I'm not going to play that game, right? It's simply about, hey, in your head, because I know, unfortunately, a lot of you are going to say, well, I don't have the time to go practice this weekend, Joe. So work through it in your head at a minimum. And then the stuff that you're stuck on, like, well, this is my modifier. Or for that matter, you've got a certain modifier. Maybe it's an umbrella, maybe it's a softbox, whatever it is. And you keep running into a problem. I want you to show up with a question and information, because most times I'm going to ask you some questions back about your question, about the situation. And we will do some varied setups. Obviously, I did all of this with the exact same subject, same distances, same lenses, everything, because I wanted you to really get an understanding of how subtle the differences are from one modifier to the next when you're doing basic portraiture, right? There's a whole myriad of other scenarios that come into play with modifiers, but for portraiture, indoors or outdoors, doesn't matter. And even for full length work, as I showed you, you can get away with very simple modifiers and a very simple setup. So next week, we'll go ahead and we'll add some extra lights in, maybe add some hair lights or rims or background lights. And, I'll show you some of the fun that you're missing out on if you're not doing this, but you've got to start out with one light. Start out with one light and build a skill set. I promise you, you master one light, master it. You master one light, you can master 10 lights in a fraction of the time. In a fraction of the time. That one light will teach you how to see light. It will teach you to see the shadows. It will teach you the subtleties. It will teach you the habits of looking for the catch lights. It will teach you to pay attention to the backgrounds and the shadows in the backgrounds. All that stuff, which is extremely important. So that's where you start. Okay? All right, gang, listen, have a great week. Talk Chat will be out Friday. Like I said, Mr. Mark Silber, great interview this week. A lot of really good nuggets again. Make sure you check that out. And next week, we're going to continue our lighting adventure. All right. So remember, get your questions together for me, because I want it to be stuff where we can connect the dots. I gave you a ton of information. Let's connect the dots to the kind of stuff that you're doing and the kind of problems you've been having. See you next week, gang. Stay safe. Take care.